wherever in the world and whenever you're watching this. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited with today's my guests today, Pete Roque and Rachel Patterson. Pete. Um, hey, today's show is called On Being a First Time Leader. And I just love that is my niche for coaching and training because so many times that little segment, I shouldn't say little, that segment of the population in the workforce is overlooked. And I've had jobs. Rachel was telling me she's the only code enforcement officer in her city. And when I was the only code enforcement officer, um, I'm not making this up. Literally, there's your desk. The boxes under the desk are yours. Have a good day. And that was it. There was no like, let me drive you around the city. Let me help you with anything. And, one thing that the job does help us do is be quick thinkers. So many benefits of the job. But anyway, I'm not going to talk too much more about myself. I have another show on Sundays called Stories of Serendipity and Synchronicity, which is really fun. And we talk about stories, and sometimes we mention the word God, and it's just great. Same time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays. I'm going to let Rachel start and introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Patterson. I'm with the Town of Erie Police Department, Code Enforcement. I'm happy to be here. So excited to be on with you today, Joan, and always Pete.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Rachel is the only code enforcement officer in the town, and it's really good. It can be really good and it can be really bad, but you learn a lot. I think and I got to do a lot when I was the only code enforcement officer in a beach town here in San Diego. I got to do so many things that people in other cities don't get to do because that's their job. That's his job. Yeah. All right. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Pete, tell us about you.
Hey, how's it going? How's it going, Joan? So my name is Pete Roque. I'm with the City of Garden Grove with the Code Enforcement Division. We're under Building and Safety. I'm currently the Code Enforcement Administrator. I served as a Code Enforcement Officer back when I first started. Actually, I started off as a Community Services Officer, which is actually parking enforcement. And then I got to meet the crazy guys from Code. I dug it. I loved it. And I said, sign me up. And I got hired, it's one of those things where I just kind of was in the right time in the right place. And I got hired. Then ended up being there for a number of years. And then I became the interim supervisor without the title. For some time, and at that time I'm like, I need to bounce out, and ended up becoming a supervisor, first-time supervisor, and that was a story in itself, and I will be glad to share it with you here on this forum. And then after that, I transitioned over to my current position here in Garden Grove.
So I thought we would just take a minute to explain what code enforcement is, because most people don't know what it is. And the first thing I say is, if you don't know what code enforcement is, that's a good thing. And then people usually laugh, and I go, because none of us has knocked on your door and told you to do something you don't want to do. And but I really like what Rachel and I were talking about in the green room, so to speak, before we went live, that you have a motto or you have a quote that you use about helping people in code enforcement in a really positive way. And I totally agree with that. So let's hear what you got, Rachel.
Oh, my dorky motto, my vision, my mission statement. It's essentially to create, enhance, and maintain quality of life and safety standards within the community. And going off that we do this by providing competent, effective resources and communication.
Yeah. I always told my people, I've worked in several really affluent areas. And I always told my people, look, this is why the property values are so high here, is because of us. Look around. Do you see graffiti? Do you see trash in the street? Do you see junk cars in the front yard? No. And that's us. But we're like unsung heroes in code.
I'd like to think that too. The dumping ground, but we take it all and make it pretty.
Make it pretty. And then when someone doesn't know what to do with something, oops, it must be code.
Indeed.
When someone doesn't know what to do with something, it must be code. So send it over to them.
That's right.
It's always code, but we have a passion for helping people. So whether it turns out to be a code issue or it's something that we can help them, get to where they need to be, I think we all take that responsibility. We don't want them to feel like they're getting passed around. So I feel like code enforcement officers, we always take that and run with it. Fix the problems.
Yeah. And I think most of us, I mean, the same with the police force, there's some that are just like way out there, but most of us are very kind and loving people, and we just want to help you get the most that you can get out of what the code allows you to have.
Sure.
Yeah. Pete, tell us your definition of code enforcement.
Well, I give a lot of presentations out in public, and it's funny because I've served in cities where you have really affluent sections of town, and then you have really poor sections of town. And it's funny because when I used to do an exercise with code officers, I'm like, hey, describe your job to me. And, they would always say, oh, I do this, I do billing, abatement, I do receiverships, and they glorify it, and I go, explain it to me if I was an 8-year-old, and it really stumps them, people ask me all the time, like my family members, like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I just tell people to cut their grass. Well, you get paid really well. I'm like, I'm good at what I do, End of the day, I go, look, when I do give little presentations and stuff like that, I go, and the best way to sum it up to some people, it's like, hey, I'm the city. You ever heard, hey, don't do that because the city will come after you? Or, hey, he's going to call the city. Guess what? I'm the city. But in reality, what we do is, we're very mediators of what we do, and a lot of times it's to get somebody into a voluntary state of compliance, where we tell people, hey, this is where we want to get you. We're not here. If you take the position of, hey, I'm here to enforce, you're just coming off really antagonistic. And at the end of the day, people sometimes don't know that they're doing something wrong. They don't know that they have to put their trash cans away or mow their lawn or or paint their house or to keep up the property values. And a lot of times you just have to knock on a door and just say, hey, I'm with the city, that we received I never say complaint. This is one of my rules. I never say complaint. We received a concern, because people don't say who concerned. They'll say who complained, but they never say who concerned, So, we received a neighborhood concern that your property is not properly maintained and yada, yada. And then, we talk to them, hey, this is the options that you have. And you give them options, say, hey, I'm willing to work with you. Just let me know how much time you need. And it's funny because when you work with people, you definitely get a better rate of return as far as voluntary compliance, and I think that model has helped me be, semi-successful at what I do. And I say semi because you always have your, some people feel like, hey, it's my house, I can do whatever I want. I want to, have a shooting range in the backyard. It's my right. And I'm like, well, the noise and stuff. And, but at the end of the day, I tell people, hey, I'm the city arm that helps, keep up property maintenance values and stuff like that. And, to sum it up real quick, we are the junk drawer of every city. I got that quote from Brandy Larson, which is one of your students. She read about your class and she loved it. And, being a first-time supervisor. And she said, hey, we're the junk drawer of every city. And when you think about it, we all have that junk drawer. And guess what? We always go to that junk drawer when we need something, right? Whether it's a tape, a paper clip, like something sharpener, and something's in there, we're like, how do we use this? And, you always keep those extra screws there and stuff. So anyways, that's how I define code enforcement.
That's amazing. And I want to say that I have batteries in my drawer. I'm trying to think of what else. I think I have a little sewing kit. I think I have light bulbs. Yeah. In my junk drawer.
Right.
That's amazing. And then I also want to tell people that are listening, either now or in the future, that we also save lives and protect lives. So we're the people that you call when an entire family is living in a garage, and junk drawer of every city. So Lorena Souls is liking it.
That is funny. Yeah. But you know what? When you really break it down, we're more of a Swiss Army knife. I always say there's a tool, there's something that we do, and it's funny because that saying's been stolen from me for so many, a lot of times. But, when you think about it, if you use the right tools the right way, you will always, get what you need. And, end of the day, code enforcement, I teach a marketing class, and, kind of to describe what code enforcement is. And, I know when I was growing up, I didn't never said, hey, I want to be a code enforcement officer when I grow up. I didn't even know what code enforcement officer is, For me, being Latino and in a poor community, I thought people living in a garage was normal. Everybody
Exactly.
Everybody's uncle lived there, But
whenever he needed to, he was like a revolving uncle.
Yeah.
When he needed to sober up, he would live in your garage. Then he would get his life back to not your garage, but then he would be gone. Then he would come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I think when I really describe what we do, we always say, hey, we're here to make sure you have a clean and a safe place to live.
Mm-hmm.
When I say safe, it could be anything from building alterations to converted garages. And once you explain to people why they can't do what they do, when you explain to somebody, hey, you can't live in your garage because, there's no egress, or, they're like, what's egress? Well, if there's a fire and the garage door is blocked, how do you get out? Oh, I can't. I'm like, well, that's egress. If you had a window or a door where you can quickly escape, then that's your means of egress. And, and people get it. I'm like, hey, these things aren't built for that,
I am so sorry. So sorry. I have my phone in the other room turned on like airplane mode, and it does what it wants to do.
And that's what basically what I try to convey to our code enforcement folks. That, if you take the time to explain things to people in the way they understand and comprehend, and they can be a part of it to make themselves safe and take some community pride, you always get good results.
Yes, all while leaving them with their dignity and respect intact, because it is still their home. And that's the most important part that I think a lot of people forget too, is it is still their home, and they're as if it were your mother. She's working the 80-hour work week and she couldn't get to her weeds, before the weekend. It's still their home. They're not schleps of society just because there is a violation. Treat them with respect and dignity.
Before we go on, I just want to say, Pete, but where would you find the Swiss Army knife?
You find it in your
pocket. The junk drawer. In the junk drawer.
It could be in the junk drawer. Well, for me, it's in my garage, because I need it when I need it, But and kind of one thing real quick, reason why me and Rachel kind of ended up hanging out, is her dedication, customer service. So let me tell you the story how I met Rachel. We did the Women in Leadership, Women in Code Enforcement, the Leadership Academy, and we interviewed. You were part of it. You did a management portion of it, which was excellent. And Rachel, actually, we interviewed her. She worked with one of the Standards and Codes partners, Marcus Kellum, and we wanted to interview stellar people. And he goes, hey, you got to meet Rachel Patterson, from Colorado. I'm like, okay, sure. So we interviewed a bunch of people, and we interviewed her, and her passion for code just radiated. Even like right now, like she's all gleaming about code enforcement. So we ended up interviewing her, and her approach to customer service was top notch. And when I say, at the end of the day, I tell my staff, hey, I want you to treat everybody as if you were talking to my parents and they were going to tell me about their experience. And that's the way she approaches them. Like she said, we're going into people's homes and telling them what to do. We're not telling, but we're, advising them on what the issues are on their property. So, her dedication to that was just anybody that hears this just is smitten by what her point of view, and I think we're going to be doing our own channel, similar to what you're doing, and just focusing on customer service and just being able to explain things to people in a certain way, So Rachel.
Thanks, Pete.
Well, Greg is here and he's agreeing with what you're saying, and he's also saying empathy, respect, and understanding.
Listening. Listen. Give people the time of day, and you'd be surprised what that can get you, what kind of results you can obtain from that.
And I think also listen for what's not being said.
Right.
It's so important, especially when you're in, it doesn't really matter I was going to say in the lower income areas, but it doesn't really matter. In the areas where they have a lot of money, just you having the car outside their house is so embarrassing. And so and oftentimes we're invited inside their homes, and to be respectful and empathetic of like what the deal is. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen code officers do, and I always kind of tend to say, hey, keep the commentary to yourself. One of the things is, you don't want people already feel bad that you're there for whatever reason, and snickering or like, oh, like, making face gestures. I mean, your body language tells a lot, and sometimes when you go in there, you have to, one of the things about code enforcement officers, that emotional intelligence has to click on like that. Because you have people make up their mind about you in the first 30 seconds that they meet you. If you're coming in like you're some code desperado, guess what? I mean, they're going to peg on that real fast. And if you take that attitude in a gang infested neighborhood, then I mean, you're going to have some issues. Or if you're disrespecting someone's mom, you're going to have some issues. At the end of the day, you have to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And just like, how would I want somebody to tell me? And I don't know if we have time, but I can tell you how I ended up knowing about code enforcement. I was in the military, and my brother had a seizure. My brother's has a brain injury, and he had a seizure. The fire department came to the house. They ended up taking him to the stretcher, and the next thing you know, code enforcement's at my parents' house, and they had a hard time taking him out. Turns out we had illegal structures in the house. Well, and when people say I bought it that way, we bought it that way. So, but at the end of the day, we were working with a code officer in the city of Long Beach at that time, and my parents didn't speak English really well, so I would have to translate. I was in the military, so I would have to call at 2 a.m. in the Middle East to talk to him during his working hours, and I was trying to work with him. And he was very, very he worked with me, knew the circumstances, knew that my brother had a seizure, he was in the hospital, and was working with us. And the way he treated my parents, it really made an impact on me. And I didn't think government folks were that bad, and fast forward to my entry into code enforcement, I ended up doing some sort of training, and he was actually a person in the audience. He didn't remember me, but he basically said, "Oh my God, I've been following you for years. I think the world of you, da da da." And I go, "You don't remember me, huh?" And I told him who I was. He still didn't remember me, and I said, "I was the guy calling you from the Middle East." And it clicked, and it just like it was just kind of, he was impressed. I go, "Look, you're the reason I'm in code enforcement," and it like totally made his day, And I mean, was he really the reason? Maybe. I was at the right time and place, but I made him feel good, But end of the day, he. I was proud at that moment. I think he's still around, but it just goes to show, like, karma exists, and it's out there. You treat people with dignity and respect, and and you pay it forward, and that's what we have to teach our new people. So
yeah, that's a great story. Yeah. I think the credit might go to your brother with the brain injury, because that brought the paramedics, which anyway, yeah. And well, there's a good example. Like, we try not to, Lorena is saying that's a fascinating story, fantastic short story. And it is. And, cause at one point I supervised all women, and I used to say, how did nice girls like us end up in code enforcement? And my story is different than that. And I just want to make sure I call out everyone here, because Brian Humphreys is here. He was saying right on to something we were saying earlier back. I worked for the city of San Diego as a dispatcher for non-emergency. So we did water, sewer, trash, hydrant knockovers, after hour emergencies for the city that didn't involve police. And a guy I worked with named Alex, he left what we were doing and went over to be with that city at the time called zoning investigators. The only thing I knew about the job was that Alex got it, and it made a lot more money than I was making. And it was full-time, and I was part-time, and I wanted to go full-time. It's the only thing I knew about it. And I ended up staying in it 30 years.
You're stuck.
Crazy.
Just stuck.
Just stuck. I just was like, but on the subject of, because I had, if anyone's listening and they want to be a code enforcement officer, I had an employee that said, she was the admin person, and she said, I think I'd like to, give it a try. What college courses should I take? And I told her psychology, sociology, and cultural anthropology. Like, we have to deal with all kinds of people at all kinds of areas and times in their life. When you knock on that door, you don't know if they just got the call from the doctor saying it's not looking good or whatever. So yeah, and it stuck. Yeah. Rachel, how'd you get into it?
Definitely not those two stories. Mine's not as glamorous. I was working for a sporting goods store. About 3 years, I had the same customers that would come in over and over and over. I would kind of, get them special things. Their kiddo was a swimmer. So, like itty bitty Speedos. And so always getting them this special product. And 3 years later, they came to me and said, "We love you. We own a contract code enforcement company. We provide services to municipalities," and kind of explained a little bit of what that entailed. So I, absolutely, let's see what this is about. I got on as the sign tech. So I went around looking for signs down, potholes in the community, reporting those to get those fixed. And it transitioned into a full-time officer. And I'm stuck because I love it. I eat, breathe, sleep, and dream about code enforcement and creating quality of life. Just being out there with people. So that was how I got into this interesting career.
That's amazing. That just goes to show you never know who you're going to affect by what you're saying.
Right. That's why you treat everyone with respect and be kind to always. You just never know what's going to happen.
An interesting thing, Joan, when I teach a course, and I always talk about how we're so the code enforcement field, I always have a picture of the Breakfast Club, those characters who were so different. It was so like, I don't know who I would be, but, which, I don't know if I'd be Judd Nelson or Emilio. I don't think I was the jock. I definitely wasn't the nerdy kid, but still, I say we're so different, and kind of like the building inspectors, we're a little bit odd sometimes, but you know what, at the end of the day, the thing about our profession is we have to think on our feet. That's a thing. We don't really have time to analyze certain things because at that moment, you have to respond in a certain way. You have to commit to your response, and that's something that we end up learning, and we start gauging. I'm like, okay, well, I can give you 2 weeks. Why did 2 weeks come out of my mouth? I mean, I could have said 10 days. I could have said, oh, you just start gauging. I'm like, and you look at them like, okay, that's going to take them like a month. Account for rain. Okay, I'll give you a month. So we start making these decisions and we start negotiating with people, and you built that in, and then we become like investigators and report writers all at once, and then we just have to and then we have to kind of memorize everything that they're telling us, because the one thing about code officers, we have the best memories ever. No, wait, you told me this. Well, you told me that. And, I know Brandy Larson's going to kill me, but I was not the best documenter. I was not, but, I learned how to write certain special things like, hey, this is what I need. And, so, end of the day, we are the best at, I think we're the best at writing reports. We're the best, I don't know. Rachel, take it away. I know she's like, oh.
I work in a police department, so I have to say, yes, we are the best. I love the profession. I have so much respect for what our law enforcement does, but I really think that us as code enforcement officers, we just have a different personality, a different approach to things. We really dive in and want to solve the problem. Our report writing, may have some extra fluff in it that it doesn't need, but it's going to get the point across. So I definitely agree with that.
Right. And Brian is saying you're the he put this up while you were speaking, Pete. He said you are the Swiss Army knife. Yeah. Or maybe just code enforcements are the Swiss Army knife. Maybe that's what he's saying, because we're thinking on our feet. We're going. It's interesting that you started out in signs, because I did only sign enforcement for the city of San Diego for 2 or 3 years, and You're talking, you think you're imposing on someone at their house. When you're at their business, it's like a whole nother level.
Right.
And so I'm always looking for a way to make it work. So you can't have your sign there in the back of your truck.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, did you know that you could have a sign on this side of the building? And I think you're going to get more visibility. So you're constantly thinking, like Brian's saying, you're pulling out the next thing and going, is this going to fit? Is this going to work? No, let me try this. Is this going to work? Yeah. To get them the most that the code's going to allow them to get. And then, Pete, I'm going to branch off of what you were saying. And since the show is geared toward first-time leaders and supervisors, thinking on your feet and empowering people. Mm-hmm. So when you supervise someone for the first time, it's very similar to when we're alone out on someone's property. I always give them the option. I always say, how long do you think it's going to take you to get that done? And more often than not, they say shorter amount of time than I was going to say. So say I was going to say 2 weeks. And they'll say, oh, I can get it done this weekend. And so now they have ownership in it. And then sometimes I would say, I'll give you 2 weeks. So now I look like being the good guy. But with the people on their property and with people that you're supervising, let them have a part in it, that I'm not constantly just going like this to people, just to say, what do you think? And I have actually said on people's property, I can sense and I understand that my presence is upsetting you. I understand that. So, and just acknowledging that. Right. And then I would often say, which is a great thing to say to your employees, this doesn't seem to be a good time to talk about this. How about if we make an appointment and I come back another time? What are your thoughts on that, Rachel or Pete?
Oh, she signaled at me. Yeah. So, when I'm out in the field, I always, I do tell them, hey, I'll give you 2 weeks. But one thing I do say, hey, if you can get it done faster, give me a call. That way I can close out my case. We'll be good, But if not, I'll give you the 2 weeks,
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of verbal communication that has to be involved in what we say. And, people forget about tonality. The way you say things makes a difference. I'm a married guy, so, when my girl's on the phone and I hear her tone, and I'm like, no, you're not gonna get good service here. Boom. And I'm like, super, hey, how's it going? How was your day? Da 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 da. And it's a completely different phone call, And same thing when you're out in the public, and as a first-time supervisor, so let me kind of scale it back, first-time supervisor, I always take the approach that I have a team, a baseball team, and I need a catcher, I need a pitcher, I need a shortstop, and we all have different skill sets. And we have to continually train those skill sets because we can't use some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts, some of us are pretty gregarious, some of us, need that extra kudos or attention, So I have to know my folks and I have to know what motivates them. And taking that approach, and kind of understanding your staff, it's really important, staff's not always going to like the direction because like, oh, we used to do it this way, or we've always done it this way. Now you're changing things and making it difficult. I'm like, look, you're focusing on what you don't like. Why don't you focus on what we need to do, And I got a quick story for you. This weekend, my son's about 12 years old, and first time I had, we had our pool redone. So we had this huge mess in our backyard. So, mom wants, the pool backyard nice and done. I'm like, hey, me and you, we got to do this. She starts moping. I'm like, look, it's taking you longer to mope than do this little sections. And being in the kind of like a quasi law enforcement background, I had them do little quadrants. I'm like, let's only do this quadrant. Let's focus on this quadrant. It took them like 30 seconds. I'm like, see, let's do this next quadrant. The next one took them like 10 minutes because it's a bigger quadrant. But when you start looking at things like that with caseloads, when you're focusing, oh my God, I got 1,000 cases, you know, you should focus on your day's task. You know, just focus on your day. You know, you'll you won't pull your hair as much because you're just focused on what you're supposed to do and try to do the best at what your task at hand. Because if you're worrying about this other stuff, it's just going to drive you nuts, and you know you're not going to be productive, and you're going to dread, you know, just like cleaning a garage. You know, it's a dirty garage. You don't know where to start. That you don't even want to start. You know, so once you start getting going, and then you know once you start moving it along, then it gets a little bit easier. So
I think that's so true. And that's why I think being a code enforcement officer for so long has made me so empathetic for people, and to approach with curiosity, like, really tell me more. So what you're saying, like, do segment, that's what I would do with, and I'm sure you have dealt with a lot of hoarders. And when we say hoarders, we're saying, yes, like you see on TV, like piled up and walkways and sleeping in the bathtub and all kinds of stories I won't mention on the air, but you know, just this one section, just get this organized by when do you think you can get it done? Okay. Now, if they say 6 months, I go, no, I'll be back next week, you know, but just, and as a supervisor too, it's like, just break the task down. Or if you have an employee that's not performing, help them break their task down. Rachel, what do you have to say on the subject?
You know, essentially I'm the same. You know, really want to have a individual take ownership when you're there speaking with them as well.
Mhm.
So I'm very tangible. So I like to make sure I give a document to everybody so that they can not only hear what I have to say, but read it for themselves. So with that, they all get a compliant state. And I always leave it as, you know, it'll say everything starts with a please and a thank you, and starts with a please, ends with a thank you. But most importantly, it's call me to discuss, or, you know, keep me informed, keep me in the loop, and I can extend your time frame. You know, let me know when you've gotten this done, and I can come by, take some photos, and get that portion of the case closed out. But I really want that citizen to have ownership and onus on what they are doing. So I definitely start with that compliance state and allow them to communicate with me, because that's what we want anyways. We want that communication.
Here's Bill. Bill's a guy that joins in my show quite often, and on Sundays he's here. Bill. And then Greg is saying there's always a story. There's always a story they will share with you if you give them the opportunity.
Right.
If you give them the respect of tell me more.
And Greg has a great class on hoarding. You know, he actually lived through some hoarding experiences. So his class, you know, he's coming from a personal perspective as far, and also like a professional perspective, because he is a code enforcement officer. So, you know, he has a great course. I've taken it. It's, you know, I love it. You know, then again, I love everything hoarding. You know, it's funny because us as code enforcement officers, we tend to, like, you know, when I watch hoarders on TV, I'm like, it's all right. I'm like, I've seen worse.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Okay. You know, and it's funny because just thinking about it, I can start smelling it, you know? And, you know, and it's funny because we do develop some skills, like some weird skills. Like, you know, I can distinguish between like cat urine and dog urine and rat urine and rabbit urine and bird urine. And, you know, I can tell you like, hey, like, look at, oh wow, look, it smells like roach infestation. You just, or bed bug. You just get the sixth sense, you know. You know, with me, my body's very. I have a kind of like you know, hypersensitivity when I walk into some establishments, and you know, I'm like, you know, I break out real fast if there's like mold or, you know. So to me, it's like we get these like secondary skills, and I'm like, hey, I don't want to eat here, like, you know.
Yeah, it's not just for identifying what weed is what.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? And I'll tell you a quick story. I know probably not super LinkedIn, you know, appropriate, but you know, we go to a lot of weed girls, and sometimes you come out really sticky, and you're like, wow, that must be some good stuff. You know, it's like you're like, wow. Even though we're wearing suits, we're still, it's like so, you know, it come out with like glitter. I'm like, wow, it looks like I was at a club or something, you know.
Wow.
But it's just the you know, the marijuana is so potent. You know? So we come up with these skills, and you're like, wow, you know, you learn a lot. I mean, being a code officer, you learn a lot, and you know, it's important to always expose your new employees to these kind of things and say, hey, you know what, this is stuff that we deal out with the public. The more exposure we have to this, the easier it is for us to handle, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. And I always tell my people, safety first. Like, we all go home with all our limbs and our lives. At the end of the day, nothing is worth in this job you putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Well, you know what's crazy, because you know Rachel's in a police department, so she deals with a other plethora of issues. Like I've never done animal control, but luckily, you know, and Rachel there, she's doing animal control. Like, you know, I didn't know that animal control officers have a secondary pair of pants in handy just in case, you know. You know, right, Rachel?
It's definitely been an interesting challenge, and challenges are awesome. But yep, you are correct. It's wearing multiple hats. You get to experience and learn lots of different things.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy, doing animal control and all the other stuff.
You don't want to know about my first call this morning, but not linked inappropriate either. But a gentleman ran over a neighbor cat in his driveway today. He was very sad and upset. So that was my first call at 7 a.m. to go handle the human aspect of it and console and understand. And then, unfortunately, yes, handle the other aspect of it too. But we do that with a smile on our face too.
Here's a really good question for that. So Greg is saying, make safe choices and go home safe. And thanks for saying that, Greg, because before we get off it, as a woman, so I started in the field at like 28 or something. And so it's taught me a lot about safety. Where's my exit? And I've taught my kids that. Where's your exit? How are you going to get out of here? Because I've been in situations, especially where they put another addition and another addition and another addition, and you're walking back into the house. You're by yourself. This was back in the day before we even had cell phones. You know, you're by yourself. You're walking, and all of a sudden, I just clearly remember this one place going, shoot, I have no idea how to get out of here, because we had gone this. And so I learned a lot about safety. So Katrina's feeling bad for the cat and the guy that ran it over. That's a bad day.
It was a bad day for him, and he very much cared. So it was a bad day for him.
And whose cat was it?
It was a house 2 doors down.
Oh.
So while we were trying to figure it all out, a gentleman comes out with 2 dogs on leash, getting ready to take a walk, and kind of looks at the driveway and says, "That's my cat." So it was very sad, but we handled it.
See, this is stuff you can't make up. I used to tell my boss all the time, you can't make this shit up. It's like every day there's something different. Okay, yeah. Here's Brian has a really good question for us, and this is really good for first-time supervisors too, because you don't always agree with what your boss is telling you to do. And so Brian is asking, do you always agree with the code that you are enforcing?
You know what? Every jurisdiction is different. You know, I'll give you an example. Here in the city I'm currently in, we do not allow short-term rentals. And, you know, I just came from Florida, and we were in an awesome short-term rental, you know, and that city allows it. And we're like, wow, this is a great short-term rental. But our city said, we don't allow it, so we have to enforce it, you know? And, you know, these elected officials, they, you know, make the rules based on what their community wants. So if their community doesn't want something, that's the laws that they're gonna put in place. So our job as code enforcement officers is to enforce those laws, whether we like them or not. You know, with sidewalk vendors, you know, in some cities in California, it's been decriminalized, but there's still other things that we can do, like encroachments and those kind of things. You know, people living in a garage, you know, growing up, I'm like, what's the big deal? Until you know, the very first call on my own when I was in the city of Bellflower, my first time code enforcement officer, first call I got was to go respond to a garage fire. You know, lady and her 2 kids died. That was my first call in code enforcement. And, you know, and at that time, I'm like, it dawned on me that how unsafe those things were. And, you know, and having to deal with it. And granted, this is my first day out in the field, you know, by myself. And that's the first call I get, you know, and, you know, which goes into another kind of topic about first-time code enforcement, supervisors, there's not a lot of structured training for code enforcement officers.
Exactly.
I think they gave me the code book. They say, hey, read the municipal code. I did a couple ride-alongs for about a week or two with different inspectors, and they were all under best behavior, and then they shot me off into the world, and I'm some sort of code enforcement officer, and then I take some training. The training, covered some basics, but didn't really cover a real element of what we actually deal with. It's like, when you go out there and say, hey, I go out there and, hi, my name is Pete. Hey, buzz off. I never, I'm deer with a headlight. Sometimes you need that extra training. You need that verbal de-escalation. I'm like, hey, how you doing? And one thing is that you have to not take stuff personally, because if you're there to do a job, and unfortunately we're the messenger. The flower guy, when he delivers flowers, like, hey, get out of here, I hate you. Like, hey, I'm just delivering the flowers. With us, we're just delivering the message of the code. We're just the stewards of the code. So anyways, that was my first call with the garage fire. And we don't always, back to the question, we don't always agree with the code, but the code's there for a reason, whether it's the building code or the zoning code, or it's some arbitrary, you can only have 3 vehicles in your driveway versus unlimited vehicles, or you can't park on the lawn. We don't always agree it, but at the end of the job, the city hired us to enforce those laws.
And I'll just say something also, Brian, is that some of the laws, they seem so petty, but they were written because of a situation that rose up to the level of the elected officials. Like, who would ever know there is a code on how long your trash cans can be left out? So I was so amazed when I found that out. I'm like, you're kidding me. And it's usually someone we haven't spoken about. Okay, in my life in code enforcement, we affectionately call the person that's in violation the violator, and the person that's complaining the complainant. And a lot of times, Brian, it's the complainant who is just calling relentlessly. Like, I would say, hey, you need to pull your trash can up. So the guy pulls his trash can up, but next Tuesday it's still out and it should have been pulled up on Monday, and that guy's calling me. Then sometimes I have to do something. And I don't always agree with the regulations, and we don't usually say it to the people, but we don't write these regulations. We just enforce them, because so many times when the regulations are written by someone that is not a code enforcement officer, or we didn't get to even look at it, enforcing the regulations can be really difficult that someone else wrote. So does that help you with your question? If you want more, put it in the chat. Elizabeth, so amazing to see you. You are on fire on LinkedIn. I am so proud of you. And then Elizabeth said, yeah, structured training would be helpful. And the thing is, the same with Elizabeth has spent a lot of her life in the hospitality and hotel business. You just can't train somebody for every single thing that's going to happen. There's just every day. Like when we were working on a new computer system, and the person that was going to be doing it, she said, okay, I need to know what your typical day is. You do this, and then what do you do? And I would be like, well, it depends. And then what do you do? Well, we might do this, we might do that, we might not do any of that. So I don't know that you can train someone for every little thing that comes up. Now, Katrina is saying, what a great question. And every new leader will be faced with this. Yeah. And I just, when I talk to my new leaders, I say, it's okay if you say, I don't know. And as a code enforcement officer too, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Let me look it up. Because the codes are ginormous. So we don't bring the entire code with us. And Katrina has a follow-up question. Do you reconcile internally what you believe in versus what you enforce? How do you sleep peacefully at night?
That's a great question. And Rachel, I'll let you take that one.
I was thinking the same thing, because I feel like I haven't given you enough time to talk. So go ahead, Rachel.
No worries. I was going to say on the other question about the believing in and agreeing with what you enforce, this goes with that. So thank you, Katrina. Ultimately, you don't have to agree, but you have to believe in what you do. You have to believe that even if it's not something that you agree with, you have to believe that what you're doing is creating a better quality of life for others as a whole. And real quick, on the not agreeing, it could be something as simple as, we don't necessarily agree with how the code is written or enforced, but we can make those changes. We here in the town of Erie have an ordinance for sidewalks. I have a disabled child, so I'm very in tune with sidewalk ordinances. You really want those sidewalks to stay clear. Here in the town of Erie, residents are required to maintain their own sidewalks, and that includes if you have a break, any type of heave or anything like that. So with that, you're walking to a door telling somebody that they're going to have to do something that ultimately is taking food off of the table and out of their children's mouths to fix a piece of sidewalk in front of their house. So you don't have to agree with it, but you have to believe. And with that, there's other ways to handle it. So other municipalities receive grants from the federal government because they have grant writers who are well versed in what type of funding is out there. So a lot of municipalities have concrete replacement programs or whatever have you. So again, you don't have to agree necessarily, but you have to believe, and you have to believe that you're creating a better quality of life as well by doing other things, if that makes sense. And I sleep very well at night.
Yeah, she dreams about code enforcement. Yeah, so yes. When reconciling internally, it's a hard thing to do sometimes because I've gone to some really bad hoarding places and we have to displace some of these folks. And, I've gone to places where I'm sitting there and I see babies with cockroaches flying, like just crawling on their face, or just a severe bed bug infestation. And it's, we have to do something to protect them from themselves. And, it's a hard thing to do. And being a supervisor, sometimes you have to make that decision to red tag a building. And it's something that we have to do. We displace people where, we have a apartment complex full of people with no water or electricity, and their toilets are overfilled and there's nothing but human feces around. I mean, these are things that you're displacing people. Some people have children and it's a hard thing to do. The food vendors, when you confiscate their goods after, you told them maybe 10, 12 times and, they're handling food right after handling money, there's a big, chance of cross-contamination or, and there's regulations out there, that prohibit that. And, and you're kind of tapping into their well-being. And, just like Rachel said with the sidewalk stuff, we have Lorena on the, Lorena is one of our cast people. She's on sidewalks 24/7 because, that's for accessibility. And she's one of the, industry leaders for accessibility. And, she we have to make these decisions. And, at the end of the day, the cities don't write ordinances just to be petty sometimes. Sometimes, they're a little petty, but, overall it's for the welfare of its citizens, and we do sleep okay at night. I mean, I have to make calls, we knocked on the door, we find children, running around in their dirty diapers, and, we figure out what they live, and the mom's high on heroin. We have to call child services, and, and those decisions are hard because, you're going to get a kid taken away. Those things eat at you, and you come to a point in your life, and you're like, am I doing the right thing? But, when you really, really think about it, if you do everything right, and at the end of the day, you're going to benefit the community and those people themselves. I mean, I have hoarders thank me after we did a case. We had, I had people thank me after I took their food, and threw it away, and they thanked me, because I explained to them how to properly get a license afterwards, So there's things to do. So hopefully, Katrina, that answers your question.
Yeah, let us know if it doesn't. I mean, I have to tell you, Katrina, we go on people's properties and sometimes they yell at us, not always, as you can imagine. So that is a question that I have gotten. Like, how do you sleep at night doing this? How do you sleep at night doing this job? And did you go to school for this? And I'm paying your taxes. And, I'm trying to think if I ever had a hard time. And I did displace one family that really made me sad that I could have put them in a hotel, and the one part of the family went to the hotel, and a very elderly man wanted to go on his own, and it made me very nervous. But other than that, I don't feel like I have ever not slept at night or felt. I think when I don't agree with what the code says is completely different than if it was illegal, unethical, or immoral. Like it's probably a different level.
Right.
But I want to get, okay, here we go. Katrina is responding. Yes. Thank you, Rachel. Glad that you can sleep peacefully since you are impacting quality of life. Thank you, Pete. The visual of roaches and children in the same. Yeah. Yeah. And I went in this house where this elderly woman was actually sleeping with rats, and she thought that she didn't have her senses. She thought they were her pets. And for those of you that don't know, rats have a little bit of oil on them. And so when they go over the same path and over the same path, they leave almost like a nicotine stain. And her house just had pathways from roaches. And we took her out immediately. And of course, I don't want to take her out of her house. Yeah.
Yeah. So you do have another code nerd on the.
I see that. I see that. I'm trying to get to her. Let me see.
Yeah,
a while back, Rachel, Ceci said, so proud of you. Let's see. Now, creating a sense of caring creates a sense of community. Yeah.
So if you ever want to learn about roaches and bed bugs, this girl is in love with them. I mean, she has little vials of little.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah, she does. She passes around class and tells everybody, don't open this thing because it could be alive. And yeah, so she has a great class on that one too. I mean, we have a couple people on this call that, just have great classes, and you can tell who really is vested in learning about code enforcement, because they sit on these type of webinars and comment and and want to learn. I mean, you can learn something from everybody. I sit through your show sometimes. I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. I kind of like in and out, but I love the message that you bring, and bringing the information to new officers. Rachel, even though she's a lone wolf, she can teach others out there, like, hey, this is how a lone wolf does it. So
well, I think that since Cece is here, and I think we owe it to our community watching right now to tell them how to look and find bed bugs. Because once you're a code enforcement officer and you've dealt with bed bugs, every time you go into a hotel, you look at your room differently than most people. So let's see. I'm going to give you a little tip if Cecilia doesn't do it. So she's just saying empathy is the key. And Lorena is, she passed out. I did too. I went to a class and she had the vials. I'm like, oh my God, this is disgusting. Hairy little creatures.
It was disgustingly great.
It was disgustingly great because you don't know what to look for, because people think that they're microscopic, that you can't, that it's so small you're not going to be able to see it. So that's what, pesty. Okay. That's why it's awesome. So I'm going to start out, and I am not an expert like Cecilia is, but I know to look at the picture frames and at the, at the end of the bed where it has where it's sewn like this, all in the cracks of here and here at the end of the mattress, they like to hide. And are you shivering? Are you shivering, Rachel?
Gross.
And so you just, let's see if
here we
go.
I guarantee you Cecilia would rather deal with the bed bugs than a dead cat.
Right.
And it's funny because there's different strokes for different folks, like, I deal a lot with the problem houses. We work a lot with our police department. So we go after some of these, meth houses. And I mean, those have a whole litany of other issues, electrical, they're cooking meth, they have a bunch of propane, they do all stuff. So we're red tagging them all the time. That's my cup of tea. That's my jam. I can be there all all day long. But but me picking up like a dead squirrel, like nah, dude, like it's just not. It's not my cup of tea. Yeah, or even bed bugs. I'm like, when I see a mattress, like when we go to the sober living homes, and sometimes with the sober living homes, sometimes what they do is they know we're coming, so they hide all the mattresses on the side of the house, and so you always find the treasure trove of mattresses, and you look and there's little bed bugs. I'm like, geez Louise. And and yeah, it's interesting, but
again, why we create ordinances too. When I first came to work in Erie, we did not have a outdoor storage ordinance. I was enforcing on a couch in a front yard, listed it under junk, and a gentleman told me, as soon as those bed bugs get out of my couch, it's going back inside. So then you create an outdoor storage code for the town.
But I said we were going to tell our listeners, so I just want to again say that Cecilia is saying, start with letting go of the misconception of looking only at the bed. They're called bed bugs, but look at the baseboard, the corners, the crevices of furniture. And she said they love picture frames. They love wood. So if you see anything, then you go and you tell the front desk you need a different room, or you go to a different hotel. But here we go. Here's the rest of the advice. When you first arrive, ask to first see where the occupant was last sitting. Simply getting rid of the furniture doesn't get rid of the bed bugs.
I think you have your next class, your next webinar there, Joan.
Yeah.
So Cecilia is a litany of information. This girl is amazing. You're amazing. Rachel's amazing. Lorena's amazing. Greg's amazing. Everybody on this call is amazing. It's just great information. I love it. And thank you, everybody, for the lovely compliments. And we really appreciate it, Thank you, Joan.
Okay, we are wrapping up. And Rachel, you said in the beginning, which I was really impressed with, that behind you on that picture is a quote by Mother Teresa. And but life is. Life is. And so I love that. If you want to tell us what it is, I don't know if it's too long, but
it's long, but life is essentially an opportunity to benefit from it. Everything Mother Teresa has to say is amazing, but life is beauty, admire it. Life is a dream, realize it. Life is a challenge, meet it. Life is duty, complete it.
Ooh, life is duty, complete it. I love it. You have any closing statement, anything you want to share with us? And how can we get a hold of you if someone wants to get a hold of you, Rachel?
Well, just thanks for having me on. I'm excited, looking forward to more opportunities to chat with you all and bring my dorky code passion to the screen. I work for Town of Erie Code Enforcement in Erie, Colorado. Anyone can get me through email or LinkedIn. Happy to chat.
All right, awesome. Pete, how can Katrina's saying, all of a sudden I want to sleep in cars and stay away from hotels and Airbnb.
Yeah. So with me, you can get a hold of me. I'm at link. You can message me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I run the Code Enforcement Experts page on the on Facebook. We are the biggest code enforcement page on the Facebook platform. We provide all sorts of news articles and information. We're going to be streaming some content in the next coming months, more on code enforcement. I'm going to do a segment with Rachel in regards to customer service and the common sense approach to code enforcement. So stay tuned for that. That'll be on LinkedIn Live, and we're definitely going to have you on as a guest as well. We are doing other segments with other folks in regards to, so what other jurisdictions are doing, how they ended up doing what their programs are doing. So, I mean, we're going to be doing a lot of interesting things. This is my last week for the jurisdiction I'm working in. I'm transitioning over to a company called 4Leaf. They are innovators, and they brought me on board to just spread the gospel of code enforcement, and I will be doing that effectively. On Friday is my first day. My last day here is on Thursday, so I'm wrapping everything up. And I will be transitioning over to 4Leaf as of Friday. I am now the director of code enforcement for Four Leaf Inc. So, and
Congratulations, Pete.
thank you.
Congratulations.
You know, and
Congratulations.
it's very excited to be there. You know, I've met folks on from Fort Leaf over the years, and I was always impressed. You know, when the opportunity arose, I would be silly not to take that opportunity. It's, you know, that was my 15-year plan, and you know, it was brought up, and you know what, I made the transition. It was a hard transition, you know, leaving government at a pretty early age, but you know what, I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things where I'm gonna make the best of it and enjoy every moment of it, because you know, I get to do things like this and be on with you and others in our industry. You know, hang out with Rachel some more, hang out with Cecilia, Greg, Marcus Kellum, Kelvin Bean, our partners at Standards and Codes Academy, and you know, being part of the Women Leaders in Code Enforcement. You know, where you two belong. It's awesome. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey as well.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the live now, and I'm here every Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, to talk about first-time leaders and other topics related to it. Okay, so